Hey guys! Today we're gonna go over my September wrap up. This is a truly absurd number of books. In the beginning of the month, I set a goal for myself to try to read as much as I possibly could this month, and I think I did a pretty good job. Luckily, I've also had the past week off on vacation, so I've had a lot of extra time to read, more so than usual. So let's get into the books I read and what I rated them. So starting off with a book that I actually read mostly at the end of August, I just didn't finish in time to include in my August wrap-up, and that is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This is the sequel to Fireborn, which I've talked about previously on this channel, and this was so good. Oh my gosh. For a young adult book, I think Rosaria Munda really weaves so many really intricate plot lines and creates a lot of really interesting characters and political sort of dynamics. And this was, I think, even better than the first one. It picks up right where Fireborn left off. We're following the same two main characters from the first one, Lee and Annie. Lee is the son of a former dragon lord, and that particular government has been overthrown, and he is a dragon rider for the new regime. And Annie is a former peasant, and she is also a dragon rider for the new regime. So they have vastly different backgrounds, but despite that, they're really close. They're thrown into this situation in this book that they have vastly different reactions to given their backgrounds. And again, Rosaria Munda does such a good job at getting you to empathize with each of the characters. And after reading their chapter, or their respective chapters, you're like, yeah, I totally understand why they would react that way, even if at the same time you're like, oh my god, no. And oh god, it's so captivating. There's also an additional point of view in this book, this young man named Griff, and he is actually a peasant rider for the sort of opposing government, the former dragon lords that were run out of this city and this country. They've established a new kingdom, and they want to take back what was theirs, and Griff is sort of like Annie, where he's got this peasant background, but he doesn't have the same rights as noble dragon lords do, and he's really torn between sort of the life he's always known and the life he could have after seeing sort of what Annie is and how she is. And again, I loved this book so much. The point of views were all equally entertaining, and again, the political situation was really complex and so intriguing. It's like Game of Thrones level stuff happening, and I love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up, I picked up Down Comes the Night by Allison Saft, and this book is kind of difficult to talk about because I think it really crosses genres. It's a little bit of fantasy, it's a little bit of spooky gothic horror, it's a little bit of sci-fi even, and I don't know, again, it's so difficult. I don't think it's quite as gothic spooky horror as sort of the cover sort of promises, and that's definitely what drew me in, but I still really enjoyed this story. This book follows a young woman named Ren, and she is a healer. She works in her country's military as a healer, and her healing abilities are magical. The sort of opposing government that her country has been at war with for generations also recruits magical people, and there's one particular person on the other side known as the Reaper, who is downright terrifying. And one day, Ren finds herself in the situation where she gets in trouble with her queen, who also happens to be her aunt, and trying to sort of save face and help her country, she ends up accepting this invitation from a lord in a sort of neutral third-party country to come and heal one of his employees. And when she gets there, she finds the employee is the Reaper guy, and she is really conflicted as to or between her duty to her country and her sort of natural inclination to help people. And she's also trying to unravel this mystery of why the heck is this guy here? Who the heck is this lord that invited us both here? What's going on? And also trying to resolve this conflict between their two countries. Again, this was sort of a cross-genre thing. There was a lot of political stuff happening, but there is a spooky kind of creepy mansion that the cover sort of alludes to, and a fun sort of interesting enemies to lovers romance. And this is a good standalone if you're looking for something just sort of different. I don't know, Like I said, it's difficult to sort of explain, but I enjoyed it and I give it 4 stars. Next up, I wanted to sneak in a summer romance I was holding on to before the season was over, and that is You Had Me At Hola by Alexis Daria. And this was so cute, and again, the perfect summer read, honestly. This follows 2 soap opera stars. Well, one's a soap opera star and one is a telenovela star, and they come together to work on this sort of Netflix show or Netflix type show. It's on a streaming service. It's not exactly Netflix, but it's hinted that it is. And they start working on this show together, and they're like the main actor and actress, and they have this sort of undeniable chemistry, but they both kind of come with their own baggage. Jasmine, our female lead, has a really public breakup that she's just kind of coming off of, and she's sort of like she can't get out of the tabloids, and she's really trying to become a more like serious leading lady, and so she sets these rules for herself that involve her dating life that are going to help her become a more serious actress and get out of the tabloids. And then we have Ashton, our male lead. He used to work in telenovelas, but he wants to become a serious Hollywood actor as well. But he has a secret that really prevents him from getting close to his coworkers. They sort of have to navigate their feelings for one another as well as their individual baggage. And this was really cute. It definitely sort of tested my Spanish 101 knowledge. There was a lot of Spanglish in here, and not that that was bad. And I think the author did a really good job of, if you don't know Spanish, kind of giving you the gist of what these characters are saying. But in a lot of situations, it does make sense that these characters would be speaking Spanish to one another. So I thought that was done really well. I also liked the sort of actors, like famous actors sort of setup. I thought that was cute and different than a lot of other romances I've read. I haven't read, I think, a lot where they're both famous, so that was fun. My biggest issue with this, however, was I don't think the thing that was like keeping them apart was like totally justified. The level of sort of paparazzi attention that these two got didn't make sense to me given their level of fame. Like, the show was supposed to be the launching pad for both of them to start these really huge careers. And so the fact that like Jasmine's dating past like is that trending on Twitter or whatever just didn't ring true to me. I don't know. That was strange. And again, we have, like in most romances these days, a miscommunication sort of trope, and that's not my favorite, but I did think this was cute, and I do want to pick up the sequel, A Lot Like Adios. I believe that just came out, so I hope to read that sometime soon, because this is a cute series, and I enjoyed it. It was, again, a nice sort of summer read. I know summer's over now, but if you're already planning what you want to read for next summer, definitely consider this one because it was cute. I gave this 3 stars. Next up, I finally caught up to what is currently published for the Wayward Children series by reading Come Tumbling Down and Across the Green Grass Field by Shawnee McGuire. Come Tumbling Down is sort of a continuation of this overarching plot line that is sort of surrounding the school for wayward children. There's sort of a central cast of characters that appear in the first one and are sort of sprinkled throughout several other ones. And I can't get too much into this without spoiling sort of previous installments, but I did think this was pretty good. It wasn't my favorite in the series because it didn't feel like totally necessary, but I did enjoy the atmosphere. We returned to one of my favorite portal worlds in this series, which is the Moors and Jack and Jill's storyline, which I think is just so delightfully creepy and dark and really just kind of encapsulates sort of the best about this series. So I did really enjoy this one, and shortly after I also picked up Across the Green Grass Fields, which is more of a standalone. This follows a new character named Reagan, and she's super into like horses and stuff. This is a book for the horse girls, basically. And she ends up in this world, I believe called the Hooflands, where everyone there is like a centaur or like a kelpie, or it just they all have hooves. She's the first human that's shown up in a really long time. And whenever a human arrives in the Hooflands, they know that their world is about to be sort of like thrown into turmoil and that this human is basically going to be the savior. So she gets taken in by this community of centaurs and they become like her found family, and it's just so cute. I don't know. I think like this book kind of has one of the lower ratings in the series, and I think it's because it's a really big departure from, again, that sort of overarching storyline that this one really kind of addresses. But I like the sort of breath of fresh air that these sort of individual books in the series have by introducing new characters and new worlds. You're kind of freshening up the series a bit. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this one as like a standalone. I thought it was done well, and I really liked the character of Reagan. You really get to know the individual children really well when you get the books where they're going into their portal world that you don't quite get when it's sort of an ensemble of the kids at the school. So again, I enjoyed this a lot, and I think I gave these both 4 stars. Next up, I read Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, and this is a book that when it came out, I was immediately really intrigued. It sort of has this setup where it's like written in a script format, which is really different, and the main character is background Asian man or generic Asian man, and sort of as he works his way up in this world, it sort of mimics like a crime drama. He sort of, again, works his way into like featured Asian man or guest star, and he's trying to achieve kung fu guy, like that status. And it's really different than anything I've ever read. I sort of couldn't figure out if it was like, this is a guy who's actually working on a film set, or if it was really just more of like an allegory for like real life. But it was interesting, and I did really enjoy where it went. I didn't know what to expect going in, but I did quite like it. I actually decided not to rate this one because this is so much about like the Asian American experience. Like, I didn't really feel like, well, I was the proper person to say whether or not it was done well, but I did enjoy it. So I definitely recommend this book if you're interested in reading sort of a not quite straightforward, but still really interesting story about that. Next up, I read a couple ebook romances. The first one was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This one was so hyped on TikTok, and I think I got it from Amazon for like $1.99, like the ebook version, and I was like, hey, why not? I'll check it out, because it was so heavily talked about. And it was like a fun, summery romance. There's like a travel element. We follow a young woman named Catalina, and she is from Spain, but she currently lives in New York because she's got this sort of baggage in her past, this really bad breakup that sort of made her feel like she couldn't stay there because people just like saw her and pitied her. And she didn't want to deal with that anymore. So she's moved to New York, and she's been working at this like engineering firm for a really long time, and she's really successful, and but she's never dated since then. And her sister back in Spain is getting married, and she finds out that her ex is going to be there with his new fiance, and so she sort of freaks out and tells her mom that she's bringing her boyfriend because she's sick of feeling like their pity because they know she hasn't really dated since her bad breakup, and she doesn't actually have a boyfriend. So she ends up sort of in this weird situation where her work enemy is like, yeah, I'll go with you, and she does't really believe him at first because they've never really quite gotten along, but they sort of have this forced proximity thing, and they in exchange for him coming to this wedding with her in Spain, she accompanies him to a couple events and stuff as like a fake dating thing. But I don't know. One, this book was like 500 pages, which I think is way too long for a romance. Two, sort of the tropes that this promised, the fake dating and enemies to lovers sort of deal, weren't actually what was happening. So, like, the fake dating thing was her misconstruing the situation. Like, his offer was totally genuine, and she just assumed that, like, he was gonna be, like, this fake stand-in. And the enemies to lovers thing, again, they sort of had banter, but he never hated her. It was very obvious from the very beginning that he had feelings for her. So if you're looking for an enemies to lovers, I would skip this one. This kind of had hating game vibes. If you do like that, it just felt like a less well done version of that. So, I don't know, it wasn't bad, but I think it was really overhyped given like how much I saw it on TikTok. I had really high expectations going in, and unfortunately they were not met, so I gave this 2 stars. The next one I read was Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bell Fleur, and this is actually the second book in a romance series, and I own the first one, Written in the Stars, but for some reason I think I mixed up the two and I started Hang the Moon, and by the time I realized I'm reading these out of orders, I was already invested So I just kept reading that one. I do plan on going back and revisiting the first one because it does seem really cute. This one in particular follows Brendan and Annie apparently is the best friend of one of the main characters in the first one, and the love interest, Brendan, is the brother of that love interest. So this is sort of like a best friend's brother trope. Brendan owns a dating app and he loves love. He likes rom-coms and he likes sort of big grand romantic gestures, and he's looking for the one and he doesn't want to settle for anything less than that. Annie moves around a lot for her job. She works in like HR consulting or something. It sounds horrible. So she's not really like the type of person who is tied down because she's had a lot of experience with sort of trying to maintain long distance relationships while she moves and they just don't work out. So she's got kind of like a bitter view on love, and so this is kind of like the grumpy sunshine trope, but inverted, because usually it's the guy that's grumpy and the girl that's sunshiny, but this was like a pleasant twist on that, and I enjoyed this a lot, and I think the author really did a great job of making me homesick for Seattle, a place that I have never been. You could just tell how much she loves Seattle, and I thought that was a really cute element of the book as well. You could really like feel sort of how this city would be a cute backdrop for falling in love. So I thought it was done well, and even though I haven't read the first one, I still really enjoyed this one, and I wasn't like confused at all, so I gave this one 4 stars. Next up, I read a graphic novel that just came out, and that is called Punderworld by Linda Sajic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry. And this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and if you've been here any amount of time, you will know I really like the Hades and Persephone dynamic. I don't know what it is. It may be that aforementioned Grumpy Sunshine thing, but this was cute, and I really enjoyed the art style. I think if you have any sort of sense of familiarity with the Hades Persephone story, this will be sort of nothing new to you, but the art style is really cute. The story itself is really cute and light. I think if you like Lore Olympus, you'll probably like this. It doesn't seem quite as dark as Lore Olympus can get, so this seems to be like a fluffier take on it, which I appreciate. This is only volume 1, so I'm hoping and curious to see if this sort of, as it goes on, does become its more like own thing, or if it's just gonna kind of stay in the traditional sort of story or what. But I really liked it. It was cute. Again, the art style is absolutely adorable, and I think just for that alone it's worth picking up. But again, if you do like Hades Persephone, I would pick this up. I do believe this is also on the Webtoon app. I haven't read any of it on there because I saw that this was coming out, but I might have to go check it out while I'm waiting for volume 2 because I'm curious to see where this goes. Yeah, I gave this one 4 stars, and again, the art is just absolutely gorgeous. All the major pantheon gods have these like crowns, and they change with their mood, and so it really makes the art super expressive, and I love that. The next book I picked up is probably the fastest I have received and actually read a Fairy Loot book, which I don't know if that says more about me or Fairy Loot and Owl Crate, but in any case, I picked up These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan, and this is really, really marketed as sort of like a, if you like ACOTAR, you should read this book, and I will say it definitely has ACOTAR vibes, but I liked it more for like what was different than, or like from ACOTAR, I guess. The love triangle dynamic specifically reminds me a lot of Sarah J. Maas's work, and that bit was a little bit annoying to me, but I did like the story in general, and I had a lot of fun with this one. So this book follows a young woman named Bree, and she lives in the human realm, but she and her sister were sort of abandoned by their mom when they were really young, and they've really had to scrape their way like through life to try to like, you know, stay alive. And she's had to resort to being a thief in order to get by, and this sort of lands her in trouble. And to get out of that, she ends up sort of escaping to the Fae realm, both to escape her thieving past and also to rescue her sister. And she sort of ends up in this little love triangle between a Fae prince, or actually two Fae princes. I forgot that one of them is a prince. Between the Unseelie and Seelie princes, right. So this was really fun. I did like the love triangle dynamic. I love a good love triangle. And I think the author did a good job of sort of like really making you feel will they or won't they about sort of both guys individually. There wasn't really one clear choice, which I thought, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, there's a love triangle, but like obviously she's gonna end up with this one guy. So I did appreciate that, you know, I was invested in sort of the independent romances, and it made me feel conflicted. This also has one of the best like cliffhanger endings I've read in a really long time, and I'm furious because the next book doesn't come out until next year and I need to know what happens. So if you want an ending that will make you scream into a pillow, this one might do it, because that's certainly what I did. I gave this one 4 stars. Far from perfect and probably a little too Akatari for my liking, but I did enjoy it despite myself, and I think if you like the tropes that ACOTAR is really known for, you will probably like this book, so do with that what you will. Next up, I picked up another novella, and that is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, and this was like the soft sci-fi I didn't know that I needed. So this follows a world in which humanity used to use robots and AI for like jobs and stuff for their own needs, and one day the robots sort of put down their tools and wandered off into the wilderness, never to be seen again. And since then, humanity's had to learn how to sort of re-enter the workforce and help themselves. And this book is really all about what you can do to help your fellow man. I don't know. There was such a great discussion about sort of mental health and sort of like your life's purpose, and do you need a purpose other than living well? And I don't know, this was so cute. And the action of this book really starts off with a robot coming back out of the wilderness and running into a tea monk. He's kind of like researching humanity. Like he wants to find out what they've been up to since all the robots left, and he sort of attaches himself to this tea monk, and I love their dynamic. The robot kind of reminds me of the robot from Treasure Planet, but like less goofy. Just that sort of like back and forth was really cute, and I don't know, I really enjoyed this. And again, it was a really soft story. If you're interested in sci-fi but like are intimidated, I would start here, because like this is a really good, it doesn't super get into the weeds of the actual AI, but there are still robots, so I enjoyed this quite a bit. This also had really great non-binary representation, or just sort of like gender fluidity representation. It's like very normal in this book, and I appreciated that. I thought that was very different. So I gave this one 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait for the next one. I think the cover just got revealed, and I believe it comes out in the first half of 2022. So I'm very much looking forward to it because I enjoyed this a lot. Next book I picked up was The Escape Room by Megan Golden, and I picked this up in the bargain section of a Books A Million a couple months ago, solely because I really liked Megan Golden's other book, The Night Swim. This one is actually her debut though, and unfortunately I did not like this one quite as much as The Night Swim. This follows a bunch of investment bankers, and I believe 4 or 5 of them get stuck in this elevator and have to start answering these riddles, and it seems like they've sort of been manipulated into this situation so that someone can get revenge for something horrible they've all done. I was into the concept at first, but like 1, it's not even really an escape room, it's an elevator. And 2, this goes super deep into investment banking, like more so than I would ever be interested in, and not even like super juicy stuff, like just stuff that makes you feel like crap about like white collar America. I don't know. So this was not it for me. I really did like The Night Swim by this author. This just wasn't up my alley, and unfortunately I gave it 2 stars. I needed a bit of a pick-me-up after that, so I picked up The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, and I was anticipating this book so long. It finally came out last month, and it took all of me not to like go out and buy it immediately because I wasn't sure if I was gonna get it for my birthday, but I went out and got it, and this was just so cute. It was like the exact like thing that I needed. It was so soft and fluffy. This follows a young woman named Olive Smith, and she recently broke up with the guy that her best friend is really interested in, but because her best friend is a fabulous best friend, she's like, no, girl code, I'm not gonna date your ex. And Olive is like, it's fine, like just do it. And to convince her best friend that she is in fact over this guy, she kind of just grabs the first guy that she sees and gives him a kiss in the hallway. And that happens to be a professor named Adam. They both work in the same department, but she's a PhD student and he's a professor, and he doesn't like oversee her or anything, so there's no like conflict there. So they sort of ensue on this fake dating scenario that is mutually beneficial for the both of them. She's able to convince her best friend that she's over this other guy, and Adam is able to convince his department that he's not looking to leave anytime soon because he's attached to someone. He'll be able to get funding for his department because his higher-ups are concerned that he's gonna leave, so they've slashed his funding. But as we all know, with fake dating relationships, real feelings ensue, and this was just so cute. Oh my gosh. If you like pining, this book has a lot of it. There's just fabulous sort of romance tropes, like a ton of them, and it even becomes like a little self-aware. At one point there's an instance where they're getting a hotel for a conference and Adam is like, you can stay with me, I booked a room, it's got 2 beds, and Olive is like, no, it's only gonna be 1 bed, and he's like, no, I got on the confirmation it says there's 2 beds, and she's like, Adam, you don't understand, this is like a common romance trope, there's only gonna be 1 bed. And he has no idea what she's talking about because he doesn't watch rom-coms. It's just so funny. I feel like, again, this is another book that's been super hyped all over the internet, but it is in fact worth a read. This was so good. As you can see from the cover, you got kind of like a Reylo thing happening. I believe this started its life as Rey and Kylo Ren fanfiction, and it's pretty removed from that. If you have no interest in Star Wars, it's definitely still readable, of course. It takes place in a college science department, so again, if you have no interest or background knowledge of Star Wars, you're fine, and I would still definitely recommend reading this book. I gave it 5 stars. After that, I kind of wanted to transition a little bit into some spookier reads as fall sort of came in and spooky season had a soft beginning, and I picked up Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This is a new sort of YA horror fantasy release, and I really had no idea what I was getting into with this book. This cover is very bright and cheery, and the description of the book was sort of vague, but this book was so good. It was like A+ atmosphere. If you're really into that in your reads, I definitely recommend it for that alone. But this book follows a young woman named Ellery Downing, and her family is sort of the town's beekeepers. They make honey and stuff for the town and trade it and whatnot, and they live in this very isolated community known as Amity Falls, and it's completely surrounded by very dark and creepy woods that they're urged not to go into because monsters and stuff. And there's an inciting incident at the beginning of this book that really sparks a lot of fear and confusion and paranoia in their community. It sort of takes place over not quite a full year, but it takes place over a long period of time. And the more time that goes on, the more that this community sort of descends into chaos, and they start running out of resources in the winter, and they're all just sort of on edge. And there's also this supernatural element that's also sort of making all of this worse. And this was really good. I had no idea what the heck was happening for the longest time, but I had a lot of fun trying to figure it out, and I really enjoyed that. This is also a loose Rumpelstiltskin retelling, so that might give you a little bit of insight into what is going on here, but I don't think it's quite as obvious as just like a simple retelling would normally be, and I had a lot of fun with this. I gave it 4 stars. The ending, I thought, left a couple of things unresolved that I would have liked to see resolved, especially where this is a standalone, but otherwise I really liked it. And again, the atmosphere was A+, and it gets crazy, I will say that. So if you like messy sort of community-based drama, read this. It was really good. Next up, I picked up The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and this book I had to keep checking to see if, like, when it was published. I think it came out in like 2015, but it honestly read like a classic, like something that came out in the late 1800s. I think Sarah Perry did a great job at really capturing that era and the writing style, particularly in the letters that these characters all write one another. It just had such a unique voice, and It was done so well. Like, I was also reading this on my Kindle, and I kept like highlighting certain parts just because they were like really, really good quotes, and they just felt more profound, I think, because they felt like they were older, you know, it felt like a classic. I don't think this story is for everyone though, unfortunately. I really liked it, but like not a lot actually happens, and I think given the premise that might disappoint some people. So this book follows a recently widowed woman named Cora, and her marriage was not a happy one, so she's actually kind of relieved to be sort of independent now. She's got a young son to care for named Francis, who is heavily implied to be like on the autism spectrum, which creates its own challenges in sort of her relationship with him. But she moves out into the countryside after her husband dies because she's sort of an aspiring naturalist, and she's out in Essex sort of collecting fossils when she starts hearing about, or rumors about, a giant serpent that is haunting the countryside in this other smaller town kind of further out. So she decides to go and investigate. And while she's there, she ends up crossing paths with sort of the town's vicar, who is also dealing with this Essex serpent thing, but he's convinced that it's like, you know, all in everyone's heads. It's more of a sign of the psychological state of the town and not so much an actual real threat. And they just have such a wonderful dynamic. They shouldn't, because she's so like science-minded and he's so religious. But honestly, that just makes their friendship even stronger. Like the fact that they're able to sort of debate these things, and they have such a unique relationship. And really, like, that's what the story ultimately is about. It's about different forms of love, whether or not it's romantic or familial or, you know, friendly. There's so many relationships here that have a lot to dissect. And it was super interesting if you like that kind of thing. But again, plot-wise, not a whole lot actually happens. And I think, like, it was about 50% of the way through this book. While I was enjoying it, I was like, oh, so nothing's gonna happen. And I was fine with that. But again, I don't think everyone will be. So I gave this 4 stars because I thought it was a great atmospheric book. It has that sort of like English countryside, like moors thing going on. But if you're waiting for like a cryptozoology kind of plot line, I think you'll be disappointed. But I really enjoyed this. So I think if you like sort of the feel of classic literature with a more sort of modern lens, I think you'll really enjoy this book. Next up is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page, and this follows a sorority of witches, which I think is a lot of fun. If you liked the Coven season of American Horror Story, I think you'll really enjoy this book. It has a lot of that same sort of like sorority petty feel, but also like real dramatic, actual dangerous magic stuff happening as well. And this book follows 2 girls, 2 witches specifically, that come from very different backgrounds, but both end up in this sorority. One of them is Vivi, and her mother's like a fortune teller, but Vivi never thought that like magic was real until she ended up at this college. And the other girl is Scarlet, who is a legacy witch. Her mother and older sister both went to this sorority, and Scarlet's known her entire life that she has magical powers. So it's fun watching them sort of cross paths and sort of deal with their individual resentments for one another, given each other's backgrounds. Scarlet thinks Vivi's had it easy, not having to like live up to this pressure of being a legacy, and Vivi thinks Scarlet has it easy because she's always known she's a witch and doesn't have to struggle to control her power. While they're sort of dealing with that, there's this other outside looming threat to the sorority. There's threatening messages that are coming to the door, and this dark past that keeps being alluded to. And this was a fun book. It was only about a 3-star for me just because there was one particular plot point towards the end, and I don't want to say a whole lot because I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like this artifact that supposedly gives like a certain power to a witch. The bad guy's like chasing that, but like they've already done the thing that the artifact is supposed to allow them to do, and I don't know, sorry if that's really vague, but like that really confused me. I was like, what was the point of getting this artifact thing if they could already do this? But I digress. This was about a 3.5 star for read for me. I thought it was really fun, seasonal. If you're looking for like a witchy, fun, light read for Halloween, I would definitely recommend this. But it didn't like blow me away. It was fun. And I finally got to Ace of Spades this month. I'm so excited to finally have read this. This was a much hyped book. I think especially a month or two ago around BookTube, this was getting a lot of attention, and I think rightly so. This was a really good read. The story follows two young Black students at a really elite boarding school, Devon and Chiamaka. In their senior year, they start getting these threatening messages from someone named Aces. And the only two people that are sort of being exposed, like their secrets and stuff are being divulged to the entire student body, are these two Black students. And at first they don't think it has anything to do with race. Chiamaka's very popular and Devon has his own secrets that are pretty juicy. But as time goes on, it does start becoming fairly obvious that it is in fact about their race. I will say this is a very heavy read. It's really heavily advertised as sort of a mix between Gossip Girl and Get Out, and I think it definitely leans more towards the Get Out vibe. The Gossip Girl sort of comparison makes me think it's gonna be like, not that Gossip Girl didn't have its own like heavy stuff going on, but like the drama in that is like so much more petty and entertaining, where like the stuff that was happening to Devon and Chiamaka was like, it was so intense and like it made my stomach turn. It was horrible. So I think like tone wise, especially, it's definitely more of like the Get Out sort of vibe. But I did really enjoy this. I think it had a lot of important things to say. The ending did lose me a little bit, but overall I thought this was a really good read. I don't want to say it was like entertaining because like, again, the stuff that happens was so bad. It was like hard to get through at some points. But yeah, overall, I did really enjoy it and I gave it 4 stars. But definitely don't pick this up lightly. I would check the trigger warnings. There's a lot of like specifically Black trauma things that happen in this book, and I think that could be kind of intense for some people. So just keep that in mind before you pick this up. It's a heavy read. Finally this month, I picked up The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. This is a brand new release and I think a perfect read for October if you're looking for like a witchy romance. This follows a woman named Vivian who 9 years prior to the events of the book got her heart broken by another witch named Reese, and in the fallout of their breakup, her and her cousin sort of like jokingly place a curse on Reese, but like silly stuff, like don't let his hair do the thing, or like things that would make his sex life suffer specifically. And she's really just heartbroken. She's not actually cursing him. But 9 years later, he returns back to this town to sort of recharge the ley lines, which provide the sort of magic that this town in particular has. And once he gets there, he like weird things start happening to his magic and later to the town it's as a whole, and him and Vivi have to team back up to figure out what's going on and how to undo this curse that she accidentally put on him that is now threatening the entire town. This was sort of a weird case for a romance in which I was more invested in the plot than the romance. I thought the curse aspect was really fun and there was a good mystery going on with that. I didn't really feel super invested in Vivi and Reese though, and I don't know if that's just because I don't particularly like have a super great fondness for the second chance romance trope. I think where they have a past, there's not quite as much of a tension there, and I think the tension is one of my favorite parts about a romance book. It wasn't quite so much will they or won't they as much as like waiting for it to happen. And I mean, in a romance, that's kind of how it always is, but you gotta make me believe it, you know? So this was cute and I gave it 3 stars. And again, I think if you're looking for a adorable October-y romance to pick up, this is a great one. So would recommend. Oh my god, that was so many books. All right, and that is all the books that I read in September. Sorry that took so long. I don't want to say I'm going to try to read less in October because I am really happy with the amount that I read this month, but this wrap up is really long and I apologize for that. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you're still here, feel free to like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please comment down below to let me know, like, have you read any of these books? What did you think about them? I'd love to talk about them. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye.